Hey, this is Mr. Jarvis from IED, and I'm going to take a minute to show you how to set up a multi-view sketch. So I'm turning this around so you guys can see it better. And notice that I have some Pinkerton Academy grid paper, and you want to use just regular grid paper to set this up. I have all my parts. I've done my product disassembly. Here we got all our parts here. Um, the nice thing about using a car or some of the other objects that you picked, that the objects, when you draw them, are going to be about the right size, the same size. I know when I drew this sketch of my wheel, notice how small the wheel is in comparison. I did that on purpose so that I could enlarge it and put on all the dimensions that I needed to have with it. So I'm going to see if I can bring that down just a little bit more so you can see it even better. Still a little blurry. There we go. There. So now you can see kind of what I wanted to do, and I did a section view over here. Now, as we begin a sketch, and I'm going to do one of the main bodies of the car, the first thing you got to do is look at your part, whatever it is, a pen or whatever you're making, and decide which is going to be the front view. In my mind, the front view is obviously the one that's going to give us the most information about the object. Usually has the widest widths, the fewest hidden lines, and I'm going to choose this particular edge as my front view. Now, the nice thing about this particular object, or the cars, if you happen to have a car, the size of it, if I just take out my ruler, here's my ruler, I'm just using a regular ruler with a 16th inch scale on it. I could measure it like so and say that's about 7/8 of an inch or so. The other tool we'll be using is the dial caliper. We have access to our dial caliper right here. And as I bring it in, I can measure it like that just to get an idea how big it is. And 7/8 of an inch is 0.875. This is showing 0.84. So it was not too bad in terms of figuring it out. I personally would start out with just the basic outline. And so now I'm looking at it, and I'm going to use the size of the actual part as my size. So I'm going to basically say that's going to go from there to there, and I'm almost tracing it out to there to there. I marked my 4 points. This is a brand new straight edge or a ruler, so I'm going to use this as my guide, and I'm just going to make my lines. Remember, all these lines are super light construction lines. You always want to start super light. Now, this means that that object is full scale. What I could have done is just, said I want to make it 7/8 of an inch, and I just double the size of it if I wanted to make it bigger so I get more dimensions in. So there's my front view, and you always want to start with your front view, just the outline of it. Now, as you know, if this is the front, then the top is going to be set up like this. Now the question is, how much space do you leave between the top and the front? How did I know where to begin the front view? Well, because I have drawn this before, I made the assumption that I'm going to need the front and the right side and the left side view, so I had to put it in the center. I didn't actually count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Whoa, boy, didn't I luck out. That's pretty darn close. Normally, I would try to measure it out and make sure it's centered. That would end up being pretty dead on, which I'm pretty lucky about, actually. So I'm going to leave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, looks like 6.5 spaces. Once again, I'm going to mark out the size of it. And it looks like it's pretty darn close to my grid lines, which is even nicer. I don't know if all your objects are going to end up being like that. There's my top view. And I'm just going to, it's going to be ever so much darker than the lines that are already on the page, just enough so you can pick out where the top view goes. So we're making our multi-view grid is basically what it's called, a multi-view grid. So there's my top view. Here's my front. There's my top. Now I'm going to leave, I like to leave the same amount of space, so I'm going to flip it up like this. Now, could you trace that out? I would actually recommend that you do trace it out. I'm going to leave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If it goes halfway through, I would say about 6 spaces there. Watch. As I set it up, and this is why I would say you line it right up on the line, and I will actually trace it out. You are going to need to trace out those curved edges in order to get an accurate dimension. Those curved edges are called round over or fillets. And now I'm going to go back and just kind of clean up my lines a little bit. That one comes across like that. This one, you can see how it tipped up in the air a little bit when I was tracing it. So I'm going to clean it up a little bit. Now, why did I trace that out? Because this curve right here, that's the curve that I'm really, really kind of looking to see I get at. So, and that's important because now I can go back. Now the radius of that curve, of course, is going to be halfway. So I could just measure from this, where it curves, to the corner, from this point to that corner. And I would say that's going to be not quite probably 3/16 of an inch. So later on, when I want to know what size that is, I simply measure from wherever it curved, from the edge of where it turns from a straight line to the curved line to the corner, and that's going to give me the radius that I need. And that's exactly what I will label in there, the radius. So now I'm still just kind of laying out my right side view. I'm going to go back and clean up these lines a little bit. I'm assuming it's going to be right about there. Nice. And then I'm going to go back and do my left side view. Now, the interesting thing is, as I draw the right side, the pegs are sticking up. As I draw the left side, the pegs are coming down. But the truth is, this overall shape of it doesn't change. So technically, I can just flip it over, and I'm going to get the same shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 and 6. Perfect. I'm just going to place it down there again, trying to keep it even with my lines. And essentially, I am tracing. And then I'll go back and straighten out my edges and my curves, get my outline of it. So this one is going to look like the sockets, the sockets on top. This one's going to look like the pegs on top. This one is going to have the pegs off this end. And then on the top, I'm going to have the peg coming off and the little pockets on the top. So for now, really, that's all the views that I need. So then the question becomes, all right, how do I start drawing in and locating where everything's going to be placed? If you have a compass at home, that's great. If you have a ruler at home, that's okay. I'm looking at this as being 1 3/4 inches wide. So I'm not ready for dimensioning right now, but I'm going to mark it as this depth. Notice I keep it super light, 1 3/4, so I can always go back and erase it. Why is that so important? Because I want to know how far it is from the center to the edge. And I'm kind of guessing 0.5. They're both 0.5. So now, because I have my grids here, I can measure in 0.5. That's going to be the center of one hole. And then from here up is 0.5. I actually go as far as to put in the center marks. And as you remember, center marks are like little tiny crosshairs. A little plus here. You're going to need these for dimensioning. So later on, you're going to darken them in. Those are going to be your center marks for your holes. Now, drawing a hole is not an easy task. Drawing a circle is not an easy task. I could even do this. Notice I try to extend them out a little bit. So we're just going to make the little pluses. Trying to keep them relatively neat. Now the hole, as I can see it, I'm looking for the diameter of it. Oh, that's easy. It looks like 3/8 of an inch. Now, if you have a dial caliper, you can do your inside dimension, right? So I can bring it in like so. And It looks, I'm going to just check it out, make sure it's dead center. Remember, I zero it out first, and I'll bring it in, swing it around. And darn, looks like it's going to be that's 0.397. How about this one? 0.397. I'd almost say that's close enough to 0.4 where I could get away with a 0.4. I'm going to say 0.395. So that's almost 0.4. What I would do personally is I would just start out with the box. You can see the box shape, right? The box. Remember, this doesn't really have to be to scale. And any curve, I'm just going to use the old touch the quadrant to quadrant, quadrant to quadrant, and I'll clean it up as I go around. Try to keep it somewhat light. And we have something that resembles a circle. It's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, the only time you would make it perfect is if you had access to circle templates. Some of you have seen them before. Some of you have not. As I look at it, these are circle templates right here. They're designed for the specific purpose of putting over the top. You line it up, you match up the center marks, and I'm going to use 3/8, and you just basically trace it out. You go in, and then if you come into the classroom, I'll have access to those. You just makes perfect circles every time. So I'm assuming you don't have that, and the truth is, this circle, that circle, this one looks a little better than that one, but they're both acceptable. That's fine. Now that I got the top view, now I'm going to do my pegs. Now, the one thing you want to point out is these pegs line up with these holes. So I already got a good start because I know where my center marks are. I'm going to extend those out just so I know that it lines up perfectly. So that's going to be the center of each of the peg holes right there. And then I'm going to come back and either measure it using my dial caliper. Looks like 0.2, I would almost say that's 0.25. 0.26, 0.26, 0.26. That means I'm going to come down 0.13. So if I were to mark it out, I could come down 0.13 on both sides. Technically, I could do it with my dial caliper, or you may actually have to convert it over. If you were measuring using your ruler, which is most of you probably are, I'd say that's probably close to a 1/4 inch. And once again, it's not to scale, so I'm going to go 1/8 of an inch either way. There it is from the center. 1/8 of an inch there, 1/8 of an inch there. Extend those lines out to get the peg shape. So I'm making sure I keep the lines even with your lines on your grid paper. Boom, boom. There we go. And there we go. Now I just got to figure out how far they come out. Excuse me. I'm using my ruler now, and I'm trying to get a good estimate. It looks like about a 1/4 inch, maybe a little more than a 1/4 inch. I'm actually going to say 5/16 to there. Make it 5/16 to here. Once again, we're going to dimension all this stuff. So if it's not quite right, meaning it's not proportionally or to scale, it's going to be very difficult to see the difference. But I'm just setting this up, doing that line there. That line, there's a little bit of an edge there, so I'm going to make sure I get both sides of it. There's a little lip here, a little lip here, and you can clean up your lines after you're done. It's all pretty light right now, so it really doesn't matter. So we're starting to get the peg shape now. This looks kind of blurry. Let me look and see. Let's see if it will match up and look pretty clean there. So we did kind of the outline of the top view. We have the front view. We have the left side and the right side view. So where do we go from here? Now it's all about detailing, figuring out where all the details are going to go and that type of thing. So, for instance, I'd go in and maybe do on this particular side, I could do my pegs that stick out, circle, circle. Make sure the distance here is the same as the distance here because it's the same peg. That's the same distance. It's just moving it over. In the front view, I have the pegs to do, but nice thing, notice I can project these lines straight down. So as I line it up there, obviously they're going to be somewhat close to the center. So if I were to mark off the center of this, right there to there, so if it's 1, 2, 3.5, I come up, there's 3 in the middle, a little further, right about there. You can measure it out, find out. Remember, we said it was going to be 1/8 of an inch tall, 1/8 of an inch above, and 1/8 of an inch below to give us about 1/4 of an inch. I can project my lines down from this to know how far it comes out. So I'll just quickly throw those lines in there. About there. And the pegs come out just about like so. I'll try to darken them in so you can see them a little better. And that's the bottom of the peg. So when we get that shape, there we go. Now you can see that I figured out how close I needed to be for that. We get that shape set up. There's your top. There's your front. We also have to do the hidden lines on this one. Where the hidden line's going to come, that's the nice thing about doing a multi-view. Here's your hidden lines right there on the edge of right on the edge of that circle where that hole goes through there. So here's the top right here. And then the hidden lines, how deep does it go? This is the tough part. If you're at home with a ruler, it's going to be a lot tougher than if I can use my depth marker here. I'll bring it down top right there. We're looking at, geez, that says 0.5 deep. Is that deep? That's pretty deep. Yeah, 0.5, 0.525. So I'm going to come down 0.5 depth in there. So I know how far down to put my hidden lines. Comes down to that depth. So hidden lines, of course, are just dash lines. Notice the hidden lines have to touch the top. Don't leave a gap between the top edge. There's my hidden line where that hole cuts down through there. I'm making them darker just so you can see it better. So now we have the front view kind of lined up. We still have to do the hidden lines for the socket that go in the back. We still got to do the holes that go in here. Remember, the distance to the center, from here to the center, is 0.5. It's going to be 0.5 on every single one of them. So don't lose that. And once again, it's pretty easy because if we've already found the center here, so if I use that center mark here, I can just project it. Here's my center over here. Here's my center over here because that's not going to change. And then I could come in 0.5 here. There's the center of that hole. I'll come in 0.5 from the other side. There's the center of that hole. And I'm ready to start doing my sockets over here. So notice everything starts with a center mark. And that's the way it's set up. So it's a matter of, it takes time. It certainly takes time. If you can utilize the part as part of your outline to figure out what shape it's going to take on, establish the front, then do the top, then the right side, and then if you need to, you do the left side. Same thing's true for these. If I were doing this one, I'd probably draw it in like this. This is what I would consider the front. That means my top is like that. And then the right side would be actually what looks like the front of the car. But I also need the back because I need the sockets that come in the back of that. So I'm going to set up that very much the same way. The windshield, I'd say there's my front, and the top's going to look like that. Now, this is one where you may want to consider doing, you don't need the left side. You may want to consider doing the bottom. So maybe you put the front in the middle, you do the top, which isn't going to give you a lot, but then you do the bottom down here, and maybe just the right side. You wouldn't need a left side because the left and right side are going to be almost identical. So that's how you're going to establish the multi-views. That's going to give you a good start. Oh, by the way, don't forget about filling out your title block. Make sure you put down RE, project. I even go as far as to say this is part number, whatever, part number 3, I think it is, date and period. Make sure you fill out, because I'm going to be looking for that when you pass them in.